Hello, Miss Melanie. It is wonderful to know that you're tuning in today. I will be here presenting the scope and work breakdown structure as project manager number 1 for CJDJ, our business responsible for organizing the music festival. Without further ado, let's begin. First, I will start on our project objective. So our main objective is to provide an experience fun enough for our consumers to go home and remember for many days to come. We'll provide a wide variety of activities, and it'll take place in the busy city of Toronto and on August 20th for a sort of, big back to school banger kind of vibe. And as you can see here in our description, as I mentioned about the details, there is a wide variety of activities such as carnival games, a lot of food options, and of course our artist. We have a couple of hit names like the Wu-Tang Clan and Tame Impala, as well as a couple of smaller local names such as Dirty Penny, who will provide as our 30-minute opener. As you can see below me here are the contingency funds. These are funds we need in case of anything going wrong with any of these sections, and are there in place to provide support if required. Next, I'll be moving on to our deliverables and milestones. So, when it comes to our deliverables, we have a compact list of objectives to complete within certain timeframes. Everything begins with the concept of vision, of course, the next month being the essential organizing, and then finally in the last part with the July 1st section there is where we get to work out all the fun details and iron out any kinks. And that's it for that. Next on is our technical requirements and acceptance criteria. This visual here helps us show possible technicalities that could cause harm in the long run. We cover all the aspects important to music festival here, from production materials to electric induced sources and a general, security and health safety protocol. This graph is available for all of my teammates to see, so that we can refer back to it and know what can go wrong in an occasion like this. And last but not least, we'll move on to the work breakdown structure. So, in this lovely photograph is our detailed work breakdown structure for Samba World. Samba World is a name that is not official, but I believe has a quite nice ring to it. Regardless, here we can see our top row, which covers the different departments certain individuals are responsible for, which will be covered by PM2, Jacob, followed by the ahead of time setup required to make the festival happen. That's acquiring vendors, advertising, all that jazz. And then finally in our bottom row are the things that will happen on the day of the event. These will be retouched up by project manager number 3, Dylan, later on. These are our activities. They just go all the way from technical setup to ticket checking to performances and closing duties, basically the entire day. That is all from me. I will now be passing it on to project manager number 2, Jacob. Thank you for listening. Sorry about the audio quality. I've been speaking on a headset this whole time. Have a good one.
Good day, Melanie. This is Jacob, and I was the project manager number 2 for our music festival, Samba World. So my first task was to create the detailed organizational breakdown structure, which was derived from the work breakdown structure. So the work breakdown structure was to remain the same. However, at the bottom would be the implementation of the OBS, the organizational balance structure. So I just have it on my desktop to my right here because the font from the recording is quite too small for me to see. So above was the original OBS, and then I added on right at the bottom the table that is, I believe it's 9x4. So you'll notice on the far left we have Samba World, and then design, the quality control, test, the production, and the outsourcing. Now I like the ones from the textbook because the terms from the textbook because they could be applied to the different procedures or packages, if you will, for this project. So you'll notice I mentioned that I specified that the opening act, the main performance, would be under a quality control test. You really could call it that if you think about it, whether in sound check or the quality of the artists themselves. And I really just looked at it through the terminology of the textbook with the packages that we needed, and of course the cost accounts that were created with the implementation of the work balance structure, and then of course the detailed OBS as well. My second, I believe I can go to the next slide here now. So my second task was to create a responsibility matrix. Actually, I'm going to bring that up on my monitor as well here. So we had to, of course, acquire the vendors, coordinate with the artists, find sponsor and partnerships, advertise, establish rules and policies, this being for our procedure and for the both paid and potential consumers as well, the budget for the project, and we had to acquire the security and medical team. So I just laid who the target audience would be and then the provider of that. Now, oftentimes the target audience and the provider had a direct correlation because of where they stand hierarchically in the business, in the event's sort of ladder, if you will. And then when, those of course were just derived from as soon as the R&D stage began, like right as soon as we wanted to see if this was a feasible event and whatnot. And then the method of communication, email seemed to be the most optimal for these methods here. My next task was to create the project communication plan, which I have right here. And so we just, again, I wanted to derive from the textbook for this. So I have responsible, support, like if Samba was responsible for it, if we supported, consulted, notified, or approved of any of these here. And so, of course, opening acts we had to approve of. As we both got to pick them, but then through the quality control test, for example, this is where we approved whether we would want to go ahead with artist A, B, and C, or go with X, Y, Z because we didn't approve of the results that the QC test yielded. And the only thing I didn't put was to calculate earnings and loss because, well, you can't outsource, produce, or design any of that. It's sourced more so once the event is ended. And then that's what leads us to my last task, which was the project priority matrix, which I have right here as well. So it looks pretty simple, but time was the one that we did not want to change because people would be, of course, purchasing tickets, and we wanted to make sure that we aligned at the same time. We did have room for slack in some points of it, and we mentioned that Wu-Tang Clan might have to push back an hour or so, or someone could play in the meantime at around 5:30 the day of the event. The performance we wanted to enhance as much as we could, again through it's just a good example, but the quality control test of the sound checks and all the artists to see if they would be the quality of which would be sufficient for both the consumers and the value we wanted to output. And then the cost was just what we had to accept in terms of coordinating with artists, all those third-party entities such as the security team and members such as that. The cost was something we knew it wasn't really something we wanted to keep it minimal, but we knew that we had to accept it at the end of the day. The performance we wanted to enhance as best we could, and the constraint, that was something we wanted to keep as best we could. And then that would move on to the third project manager.
With reference to schedule, venue and crowd-wise, we're good. The venue is rented into the night, and the people are going to be there for a good time until it closes. But the artists are scheduled to stop performing at 5:30, and we'd prefer to keep the schedule because all of the artists need to get to bed on time. Given this, the critical path is 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That leaves activities 2, 5, and 6, which are just teams which diverge from the critical activities on the network after those activities kind of settle down from peak demand. For example, the initial entry and continued entry. The initial entry period demanded more resources like security because the disproportionate size of the lines compared to the rest of the day. And so after that period of initial entry ends, a majority of the security and medical teams disperse throughout the venue. I'll address the more important activities along the critical path and some of the more important ones external to it. 1, setup. This is proactive work to make sure the day goes smoothly. 2, this is the production crew and setting up. They're separate from the setup team. They're the same people, but we recognize them differently because it's such a significant portion of the day. That activity is it should be recognized on its own. 3, initial entry. When we open the floodgates, most teams are centralized at the entrance until the opening act. 6, the maintenance team. It's part of the initial entry and then it transitions into the maintenance team, as in the security, the medical, and the vendors. Each act independently, obviously, but the security and medical are mostly stationed at the entrance initially. 7, the main acts. This is the reason we're here and obviously the most important thing to go well. And 10, cleanup and closure. We're virtually certain to be on schedule with this. We start cleanup and kicking people out later at 10 p.m. if we have the venue and we have a liquor license, we can make money, and so obviously we don't want to kick people out until our venue time is done. Start to finish, implementation was approximately 20 hours. Setup starts at 4 a.m., ends at 8 a.m., and that's when we start letting people in. The production teams will continue working until the performance ends. The opening act is where things start to diverge, as at 10 a.m. the maintenance team leaves the entrance and they go do their own things. The performances are expected to take 6 hours in total, with 2 1-hour performances and 8 30-minute performances, after which the party goes on until 10 p.m. When we shut it down and ask people to leave because we need to clean up. As you advised, we used rough estimates. If any seem particularly off, just take it as we got a really good deal, or if it's too high, take it as somebody else getting a really good deal. Our project manager 4 gave an estimate of around $120,000 for contingency funds. This is about 10% of our project total, and that seemed appropriate. Here's the Gantt chart information as well as the Gantt chart itself, which outlines our project network in a more time-oriented manner as opposed to just a sequence of events.
As project manager number 4, I'm responsible for the risk management of our music festival that we're throwing on. So as you can see, I've created a risk breakdown structure, and everything is sectioned off into 4 main categories. In green, we have our strategic risks. So these are any risks that are involved with the planning of the music festival. Second, we have in yellow our compliance and legal risks, and this involves the contracts and agreements between our venue and musicians, and additionally, health and safety issues that may arise. Down at the bottom in blue, we have our operational risks, and these are the risks that are involved with running the event itself, anything that can happen for the duration of the music festival that might go wrong. And finally, we have external risks in red. These are the risks that are placed outside of our control, but it doesn't mean we can't plan to reduce the impact of these potential risks. Taking a look at 5 of the bigger issues from our risk breakdown structure, we can calculate the risk value and see which ones are going to pose the biggest potential threat to our music festival. And based off the risk value numbers I've calculated, the 3 main issues we're looking at are going to be weather issues, artist dropout related issues, and equipment failure. Taking a look at these risks within a risk severity matrix, we can see that 2 of these lie within our red danger zone there. So we want to keep an extra eye out for weather related issues and equipment failure. While our 3 other issues are definitely ones to keep an eye on, they don't pose as big of a threat to the music festival as our 2 in red. Now that we know how much of a threat that these potential risks impose on our music festival, we got a contingency plan, and we got to find out ways around these obstacles if they do present themselves. So, first of all, weather issues. Unfortunately, I don't personally have the ability to change the weather. And as far as I know, neither do the other 3 members of my group. So, we got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We are going to come to the event with large pop-up tents and rain ponchos if we are expecting rain. And unfortunately, if there is a tornado or hurricane inbound, we're going to have to postpone the event. Now, if we have an artist drop out on us, we are going to introduce a clause into our contract that makes them financially responsible if they drop out on us last minute. Now, this might cover us financially, but we still have an open hour or so on the stage. So to combat this, we are going to have a few flexible musicians ready to play an extra half hour, an extra hour if needed be, and they will be compensated for that from the money that we take from the dropped out artist. And finally, equipment failure. I'm told there are some things you just don't cheap out on. You don't cheap out on tattoos or shoes, and you do not cheap out on music equipment. So we are going to use the highest quality music equipment and test everything at soundcheck. If somehow something still ends up breaking during the festival, we are going to have backup cables, backup speakers, backup instruments, everything ready to be switched out at a moment's notice. Finally, we take a look at our contingency funds, to which we have allocated $117,500 towards. This accounts for 7.7% of the total music festival budget and covers things like backup equipment, logistics and infrastructure, artist dropout, staffing shortages, and weather issues. And just to be safe, we put $25,000 towards miscellaneous expenses that we may not have expected. Now, With all this being said, we hope that nothing goes wrong during this music festival, but we are prepared if it does.